Today is the off day for the Mariners, their first one after the All-Star break. They have had a really tough time since then, losing the series against the Houston Astros and getting swept by the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. How fun. So today, since it's the off day, I figured let's answer some questions from people on Twitter about the Mariners, and let's just see if we can dive into some things that I normally haven't talked about in any of my other videos. Before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. You can like the video as well, and comment down below your answers to these questions we're about to go over. Let's get into our first one of the day. This one comes from my guy Stu. If Scott is fired or let go at the end of the season, who would you like to see replace him as manager? Still a lot of baseball left. It might not be all doom and gloom, so he might stay. There is a lot of baseball left. There's still a little over 60 games left in the season, so a lot can still happen, and we're only one game down of first place in the AL West, so you are correct in that last regard. However, we have to understand that we just lost a 10-game lead in a span of a month, and since the All-Star break, we just got swept by the Los Angeles Angels, who are one of the worst teams in baseball this year. So it's really hard to justify Scott staying, especially after the last few games, and just the vibes have been absolutely in the gutter. And that's what Scott's known for, is that clubhouse presence, being able to bring everyone together to go towards that common goal. And it's clear that we don't have that right now. Like, there is just no consistency for the vibe. There's no optimism, really. It feels like just they are flat as can be. It just doesn't feel like they're even trying to be competitive right now. So that's Scott's strength as a manager. We can go into his in-game decisions, his bullpen management, all that, which I think all of us can agree to a degree that it's shaky at best. So I don't necessarily think Scott's going to be let go in the middle of the season. I'd be very surprised if that did happen. However, if it did, which is really the spirit of your question, it most likely would be Christopher Negron, who's our first base coach right now. And that's kind of the general consensus I've understood from a lot of people who've talked about Scott's job recently, that Negron is probably that heir apparent at this point, which makes sense. I mean, when you are one of those base coaches specifically, you are talking to the guys when they get to first base. You're usually the first person they see after they get a knock. And it just seems like, he has a really good connection with a lot of the guys. So it would make sense, because it's going to be really hard mid-season to find someone who doesn't currently have a job and get them to come in. There's probably not a great amount of good candidates for that either. So it would most likely be someone internal. Negron makes probably the most sense. I don't think it would be Acta. I just don't really know who else it would be. So probably would be Christopher Negron. The next question of the day comes from the Seattle 54%ers. Why are we acting like the AL West isn't still wide open? Yes, it's been a tough couple of weeks, but the only thing we should be doing is adding, in my opinion. Not only are we upgrading in the position we trade for, but the pressure comes off of Julio and Cal, which would upgrade them. You're correct, and I do think this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how people are talking about what's going on with the team right now. Now, there are 100% people who think we should sell, people who think we should give up the race for the AL West, and but I think that's a really small minority of people. I think I can speak for us content creators and the people who make YouTube videos and put in that time to create content about the team. We all are aware that we are very much in this race still. A lot of the criticism you see right now is not coming from a place of, wow, this team just sucks, they need to pack it in, like, I'm done with this team. It comes from a place of, we know they are capable of a lot more than what they're doing right now, and especially on the offensive side, literally all year that has been the case. They have some people who on paper are good talents. Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco, obviously your core players, Julio and Cal, and JP to an extent, even though he has not necessarily had the same track record as some of the other people. So I think it comes into a bit of a misunderstanding that when I am criticizing the team, when I'm making videos like, is the 2024 Mariners the worst offense in franchise history, it's not me saying like this team cannot do anything in the playoffs and they should forfeit this season. It's coming from a place of frustration because I know the results could be different. I know the results could be there for this team, and especially off of the backs of the starting pitching, who has still been elite and one of the best in baseball this year. If your offense was just at least league average, then you would probably still be leading the division by a few games at least. And that's where the frustration comes in, is that they are totally flat right now. You just lost, you just got swept by Los Angeles Angels. I mean, it's hard to be optimistic at that point. But ultimately, I agree with you. It is still wide open, absolutely. And on the Houston side, their rotation is still very beat up, and some of those guys are not coming back this season. So in my opinion, this is the time to push your chips in and try to go for the AL West crown. And then once you get into the playoffs, it literally just goes down to who's the hottest team. It doesn't matter if the Baltimore Orioles or the New York Yankees or Los Angeles Dodgers on paper have the better roster. It matters on who is hot and who is performing in October. That is who is going to go a long way. So you never know what's going to happen. I think you always need to go for broke to make the playoffs, because at that point, at least you're giving yourself a chance to get to the World Series and potentially win it. If you don't make the playoffs, there's no chance there. So that's where I go on that. Now, a couple other parts of your question, we'd be upgrading the position we trade for, which is true, but the pressure comes off of Julio and Cal, which would upgrade them, which is a good, point to make, that if you get one of those really high impact bats, like a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or a Luis Robert, even if, obviously, it's not a for sure thing that those guys are going to perform well in Seattle or on the Mariners, but those are guys who are needle movers. They are guys who, if you bring them into that Seattle clubhouse, those other people in that clubhouse, those other teammates are going to be like, one, the ownership and front office believes in us to bring in this guy of this caliber, and both Vladimir Guerrero and Robert have such huge upsides that if they perform well, they are an instant huge spark to this team. You give that pressure, it comes off of guys like Julio and Cal, like you said, and even some other guys, to not feel like they have to be the guy. They don't have to be swinging out of their shoes trying to hit 500-foot home runs. They just need to do their job. So 100% agree with you on that one. But I think we covered everything in that question. We will move on to the next one. Going into question 3 from Touching Bases. If the Mariners don't acquire 4 bats, do you think we should aim for 2025? And then you actually outlined a couple moves that you think could occur. So you would DFA Andres Munoz, or I guess trade him, I don't know, and then get Kirby Yates instead. Same with Gregory Santos, sign Hoffman, Polanco for Ahmed Rosario, Rayleigh and Haniger for Santander, Garver for Christian Walker. I'm assuming that's who you're referring to. Trade Castillo for 6 prospects and sign free agents Jack Flaherty and Corbin Burns, who are both starting pitchers. Now, we'll break this down one by one, okay? The first part of your question, if the Mariners don't acquire 4 bats, do you think we should aim for 2025? First thing, I don't think they're going to acquire 4 bats. I think regardless of the moves you make, there should be, at least in half of the moves you make this year, I would hope that a couple of them do affect, in a good way, the 2025 roster. So I wouldn't say you put all your eggs in the basket, like taking away your chances for 2024 and pushing it all onto, that push for 2025, because you have to remember the Astros are going to get a lot of their starting rotation back, which has been their big Achilles heel in 2025. So you don't know if that's really going to be a good window for you. I don't know. And then we'll go kind of one by one. So Andres Munoz for Kirby Yates instead. I don't see why you need to do that. Andres Munoz is not going to be, making Kirby Yates money, so you're actually saving money if you just keep Andres Munoz. Gregory Santos for Hoffman. It's hard to say. I don't know if Gregory Santos is going to be one of those guys who is constantly on the IL. He hasn't really had that swing and miss I was hoping he would be, and is very limited in number of innings. It's only been like 4 innings so far this year. For that, who knows? I think he has a bit of control left too. Jorge Polanco for Ahmed Rosario. Yeah, I mean, right now, Jorge Polanco's still not doing enough, in my opinion, to justify his roster spot even right now. I don't know who else you get for that. It would have to be someone coming in from outside, like a Jazz Chisholm or something. I'm fine with letting Polanco go. I don't know a whole lot about Amin Rosario, but, I just need someone who's consistent, at least around league average, because that would help this team a lot. Rayleigh and Haniger for Santander. Now, obviously, I'm fine with Mitch Haniger not being on the 2025 team. Luke Rayleigh is a hard one because although he's been struggling a lot lately, I do think he has that potential to be a impact player for us. And I do think that Luke Rayleigh could be also a clubhouse leader for us. I mean, you kind of saw it earlier in the year with the White Sox on that, bunt base hit, that really clutch one. You can tell he cares about winning. He cares about this team. So I'm a little more hesitant for Luke Rayleigh, but Santander is like one of those guys where I would rather take the upside of Santander for Luke Rayleigh. So I'm fine with that if you can make something like that happen. Mitch Garver signed Christian Walker. I mean, I would certainly prefer Christian Walker over Mitch Garver because Walker's a lot more consistent and he would be a significant upgrade at first base. From my understanding and some of one of my sources is a bit closer to the Diamondbacks, it sounds like Christian Walker very much probably wants to re-sign in Arizona, so that's going to be a tough sell. You're probably going to have to go over what the Diamondbacks would give him to potentially land him. And with Mitch Garver, he has that potential 130 WRC plus season upside that I'm fine with him kind of staying in the org for next year to see if he can maybe pick it up. But obviously, if it comes at the expense of not getting Christian Walker, I'd prefer Christian Walker. Trade Castillo for 6 prospects. Per Spotrac, he has a no trade clause, I think, through 2025. It says 2023 to 2025, so I think that's through the 2025 season. So starting in 2026, he can't there can't invoke the no trade clause. I don't think you would get that, so that's more of a I just don't see that happening. And Jack Flaherty and Corbin Burns, I mean, I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to this front office unloading enough payroll to get those guys, especially with the core we're still going to have of a Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, and Miller and Wu, depending on if they get dealt or not. Corbin Burns is going to be obviously the big one. He's going to command a lot of money because he's a Cy Young candidate almost every season at this point. So I would love them to get Corbin Burns. Obviously, that would be awesome, but I don't think it's necessary. I think, this trade deadline and this offseason, you really need to hammer down the offensive side and a bit of the bullpen. So I think those are your biggest targets when it comes to the next year of transactions. Going into our next question here from Binghamton, who do you think will pick up Ty France? Which is a little bit tough. I tried to kind of look, the method I took for this to figure this out was I looked per Fangraphs what like the WRC plus by first baseman per team is, and looked at the guys who are, or the teams that are contenders right now to see would any of them want Ty France to try to help them in that playoff push. The first one that really stood out to me was the Houston Astros. They've only gotten a 68 WRC plus combined out of their first base position this year. Right now, their primary first baseman is John Singleton, who is at a 93 WRC plus on the season. And for reference, Ty France, before not being on the team anymore, is at a 96 WRC plus. So a slight improvement on that. And I did look at the park factors per Baseball Savant, and it actually looks like France would have a considerable more homers if he played in Houston than he did in Seattle. So I think it's possible he could go to the Houston Astros to be a potential small upgrade at first base, which would be something to say the least to see Ty France in a Houston Astros uniform, but it's possible. The second team I looked at was the New York Yankees, who right now in the first base position is only getting 84 WRC plus on the season. Right now it's swapping between Ben Rice, who they just called up, who's currently at a 105 WRC plus and 97 at bats, and DJ LeMahieu, who mainly plays third base, but he does do some first base as well for them, who's at a 51 WRC plus. So I could see him maybe going to the Yankees as a upgrade over LeMahieu. However, the problem with that is LeMahieu is mainly playing third base. So I don't know, do you shift Ben Rice over to third base because he's a bit more athletic and put Ty France at first? I mean, you technically are upgrading over LeMahieu. So that's possible there. And then the Milwaukee Brewers they're leading their division right now in the NL Central. They've been getting a 90 WRC plus out of their first base position, with Rhys Hoskins and Jake Bauers mainly taking the innings there. But both of them are either at league average or slightly above league average. So I don't see why they would do either of those things. So really it comes down to at least the teams that are in playoff contention would be the Houston Astros, and the New York Yankees could use them potentially as well. So there's that. As far as teams out of contention, I have no idea. I just hope he goes somewhere and has success, because he seems like a great guy. So, I'm not going to root for his downfall or anything like that. Okay, going into the fifth question from Sean Collins from the Collins Like It Is podcast. You can catch me on their podcast next week, actually. If you were in charge of the Mariners uniforms, what changes would you make? This is not intended to start a Fanatics rant, but I'm here for it if it does. First of all, screw Fanatics. Screw Nike, whoever did the jerseys this year, whoever is at fault for not only the quality, but the aesthetics of them, terrible. Give it back to Majestic. I don't know. They just need to look like they did last year. They would be fine. The bigger letters, I hate it as a jersey connoisseur. I absolutely hate the changes they made this year, and I don't really, they can say all they want, oh, it's helping with breathability and all that. Those dudes are soaked in sweat, and you can tell by the third inning of every game. So don't tell me this is some, helping the guys stay cooler. Clearly that's not happening. As far as the Mariners uniforms go, I have two main changes, okay? One smaller one huge one, okay? The first one is, I think the Seattle Steelheads need to be at least monthly, if not weekly, okay? Those things need to come back. They need to be consistently in the lineup of uniforms. The Seattle Steelheads is potentially one of the best uniforms in all of baseball, and it's a crime that not only have they only worn it once a year, but even this year they didn't wear it because of Fanatics and Nike. So that's the first change I would make. The second one is, and this is a huge one because it involves a rebrand of the team itself, I think you need to go for a more modernized version of the old Trident, of the old yellow and blue. The City Connects and seeing them in person has kind of swayed me a little bit on that. I would love to see them do a modernized version of your old logo, of your old color palette, and find a way to make it both modernized but still a bit nostalgic. I think that would look fantastic. I'm a huge Sunday Creams guy. I love the Sunday Creams. I wish they didn't use the normal Compass Rose S in yellow on those. I wish it was a Trident, but in those otherwise would be perfect uniforms to me. It needs to be something like that. So that would be my big change. Yeah, I would get rid of this flag, put a big Trident there. Bring back the Trident. I don't need the Compass Rose S anymore. So that's where I'm going to go with that. We're about to get into the last question here, but before I do, just want to remind you, if you've liked this video, please leave a like. It helps me out a lot. And subscribe to the channel. I'm on the road to 500, trying to get there before the end of August. That would be great. So help me do that, and comment down below, how do you think you would answer these questions? I would love to hear from you. And the last question from Lindsay Burton: why are we the way that we are? And this is a really great question that I want to answer like this.